this gets confusing too, right? Because we're Chinese and immigrants. We weren't even here. Our ancestors, why is it our fault? Why do I need to deal with this? I'm like, that's all. I'm like, and we were oppressed too. You know what I mean? So among Chinese, it's a little bit more funny. I find this kind of. I mean, my ancestors didn't do anything to you. We didn't have interactions, right? We're Chinese, you know. But generally speaking, I think for Canadians, I think that it is important to study the history and not just the history in the recent 20 years by the critical race theorists that always seem to paint the white man as evil, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about neo-Marxism right now. But anyway, it comes from an ideology that comes from neo-Marxism anyway. It's just like an oppressor and oppressed narrative, where with Karl Marx, it was based on economics, right? You might remember in social studies, bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? The landowners and those who work for it. But they take that same framework of oppressors and the oppressed, and they frame it in terms of race. That's not as helpful. If you actually read the earlier Canadian history, it's not always painted that way. I think that's more helpful. But I do think it's good for us to study our country's history. And I just hope that for an individual Christian, when you are practicing or agreeing with Indigenous land acknowledgments, that you're doing it because you've thought about it and not just bandwagoning or scared of other people if you don't, right? Because that's just people pleasing. You got to think about it. Okay, do I actually know why I'm doing it? In a work setting, if you're required, you should ask those same questions and don't just do it. This is the same with the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion training at work that you're required to go into. You shouldn't just do something just because your work authority tells you to, particularly in ideologies that may conflict with the faith, with biblical understanding of race, right? In terms of critical race theory, white men is always bad, even if you're not personally racist. A white man could be, according to critical race theory, a white man can be married to a black woman and still be told that he is racist by virtue of his skin color because he has white privilege and he's in the system. I'm like, that's just wrong. Like, that's just, right? Like, why are we changing the definition that Martin Luther King so aptly and helpfully defined, that racism is about character and individual rather than the status of your skin? This is like, it becomes like, now we're like anti-racist against now white people. Now we're racist against white people just because of their skin color. It's like so wrong. Like, it's wrong both biblically, because what does the Bible teach? The Bible teaches that all of humanity has fallen into sin. So every race is sinful and every race needs to be redeemed by Christ. There's equality in your sin, and there's equality in your opportunity for salvation. That's it. That's what the Bible teaches. Critical race theory does not teach that. It teaches that white people are bad, and then depending on your spectrum, if you've seen some of these spectrums, you can Google it as well. That for our southern neighbors, United States, the closer you are towards black, the more rights you have by virtue of you being the oppressed. And then in our case, it would be the indigenous, right? So you got to study this kind of stuff, and then not just sign something or say something, or even like this wasn't asked, but even if you're required for pronoun changes, you need to think about it before you make the decision, and then you need to count the cost as to how that might affect your job related. As for church, I don't think we really need to do it unless you really feel strongly after you study. I don't think we need to do it. I don't think we need to give lip service to it just because everyone else is doing it in order to be relevant.